Good morning. Welcome to Wake Up with Ashland. My name is Eric Brooks. I am the curator here at Ashland, the Henry Clay Estate, and I will be your presenter for today. And it's great to be with you today. This is obviously a great week in Kentucky every year, and we're very excited, as we always are for this time of year. It's Derby week. We're all ready to watch the Derby, really grateful that the Derby is back on its traditional weekend this year after having taken place last year in the fall due to COVID. So we're really grateful that things have improved to the point that it can be held in its usual weekend, and there will actually be some people spectating this year. Good morning, Betty. Betty is one of our loyal volunteers. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you being here. So we're going to talk about the Derby today. We're going to talk about Ashland's equine legacy in a variety of different ways. I think you'll be amazed at the connections between Ashland and the Derby and what's gone on here in the past. So we're glad to have you with us. We'll get started. First, our equine legacy starts with Henry Clay. I'm going to start with this horse right here. This is Buzzard. As you can see, hopefully it's not too clear. There we go. Got by Woodpecker. That's Buzzard's sire. Buzzard was imported from England. Buzzard was purchased by Henry Clay and 4 other gentlemen. Good morning, Mary, another of our volunteers, to stand at stud in Kentucky. He was a little bit older. By the time he was purchased, he was blind in one eye and lame in one hip. But he got the job done in the breeding barn, so that was all that mattered. Now, this horse, as I say, was purchased by 5 gentlemen. If you watch the Derby this weekend and look at the program, you'll notice that most of the owners are LLCs or companies. That's because those groups own the horse collectively. That is, any individual in the group is only taking a small part of the risk because they're part of the group. This is called a syndication. And when Henry and his colleagues bought this horse, they each put in money, but none had the total risk because none of them bought the horse outright. So this horse was syndicated, and this is in fact the earliest known syndication. So a very important horse at that. And there's actually a horse in the Derby this year in whose pedigree Buzzard appears. So his blood still flows. He is a stallion, kind of a foundational stallion in American racing, and is still found in many important pedigrees today. Another horse who's found in many pedigrees is Yorkshire. Henry Clay had 3 prize thoroughbreds, and he got all of those thoroughbreds in 1845. They were all gifts. Yorkshire was his prize stallion. This particular broadside was done by Henry Clay's son John, advertising Yorkshire's services for breeding. And it's got a whole pedigree and all of his performance record and everything else on it. It's really quite an interesting document. And these would have been circulated at tracks or amongst thoroughbred owners, letting them know that he was available for breeding. Now, Henry Clay had 2 other horses, 2 prize mares, Magnolia and Margaret Wood. Those 2 mares are part of very, very important bloodlines. They have what are called female tail lines. And in the thoroughbred world, those are the most important lines in terms of tracing bloodlines. Now, we at Ashland learned all of this in 2005. We did a big exhibit with the International Museum of the Horse in which we looked at, it was called Kentucky Bloodlines, the legacy of Henry Clay. We looked at the horse racing and breeding legacy and all of Clay's descendants in it. And we got to know the woman who was at that time the breeding manager at Three Chimneys Farm. And she explained all of this because there's a lot to it. Bloodlines are incredibly important, and they trace them back well over 200 years, almost 300 years at this point. So it's really remarkable, the information that they have. But the female tail line is the most important part, and that is a descent from through the mares on the female side. So if you talk about being descended from a horse, that's how you're talking about it in the female line. Magnolia and Margaret Wood have female tail lines that include 11 Kentucky Derby winners. This is our Kentucky Derby winners board. You can see there that we got 5 descended from Magnolia and 6 from Margaret Wood. Now, of those, The very first one in our list was bred here at Ashland by John and Josephine Clay, Henry Clay's son and daughter-in-law. And the second one, Riley, was also bred here at Ashland, again by John and Josephine. I know it says Mrs. John M. Clay here. The fact of the matter is, Riley was born in 1887, so Riley would have been bred in 1886. John was still alive at that time. John was still active. We have no information that indicates that he ceased to be active until his death in 1887. So they would have done this together. Now, she took over afterwards and continued breeding very successfully for many years in her own right, became one of the great early horsewomen in the Kentucky horse racing industry. But those two were both bred here. Daystar is the son of this horse. This is Star Davis. Star Davis is out of Margaret Wood. So Star Davis's mother was Margaret Wood. So he is in her female tail line. This painting was done by a man named Thomas Scott. Good morning, Diana. This was actually done here at Ashland. And this shows what Ashland looked like. I believe this was done in the 1870s. So this would have been down around the area where the Romney Road Kroger is today. Good morning, Mike, another of our volunteers. You can see here some of the structures. I don't know if you can see it real well. There's a tower, under the horse's tail here. That tower stood in the middle of John's track, and it was an observation tower he used to watch his horses train. Now, the mother of Daystar was a horse called Squeezum. This is Squeezum's mother, Skedaddle, and a sibling, the Slashes, also here at Ashland, another Thomas Scott. Good morning, Brad. Good to see you. Good morning, Katrina. So this is Ashland, in the 1870s. This is, you can see, it was all pasture and horse farms, like many of the horse farms that still ring Lexington. So that's how it looked. This is John. He was the proprietor of the Ashland Stud, and his wife Josephine, who can be seen here, and joined him in that business. This is their home called Ashland on Tates Creek. There's my lovely wife. And my cat is watching. Apparently my cat now wants a horse. I think we'll settle with one cat and two dogs. I don't know that our neighbors would be cool with a horse, but whatever. Good morning, Annette. So that's Ashland on Tates Creek. That house stood near the corner of Providence and Colony Boulevards here in Lexington. There's an Anglican church there now. If you ever go to the farmer's market on Providence, that's where this house stood. Good morning, Shirley. If you're buying produce there, you're buying it literally within the bounds of what was this building. Good morning, Sue. Sue was one of our volunteers and one of my primary horse researchers. She learned a lot of this and was a co-curator on the 2005 exhibit. And so every year she worked with me doing Derby research, etc. So great to have you aboard. So that's where they lived, and their track was at Providence and Colony, around that area. There is actually a 1937 aerial photograph that shows it still there. It was a two-layer track, 2 levels, so that when John trained, if it was a rainy day like today, he could train on the upper level and the rain would run down to the lower level. So it was a very fascinating and really ingenuitive track. We know that Henry Clay had a track here at Ashland. We aren't sure exactly if that was the same track or if he had a different one. I do have a source, a gentleman who grew up across the road, whose father was a vet. This gentleman went to work as a teen for Henry Clay's great-grandson and worked in the stables on the farm, and he claims to have walked around the farm and seen evidence of no fewer than 4 tracks. Now, I don't know that that's true, but we know Henry Clay had one and that it was one of the first tracks in Lexington, and so it was one of the first places that people raced here in Lexington. Of course, it was supplanted by the Kentucky Association track, which was downtown. It came along in the 1820s or 30s down near Race Street, which is why that's called Race Street. It's long gone. It was replaced by Keeneland, which opened in 1936. You may this weekend hear them discuss the purse for the Derby, the prize money. Well, this is why it's called that. This is a racing purse. These were originally given to the winner of the race and were filled with cash, which is why the prize money is called the purse. We have 2 on exhibit. There's another one. We have a third on exhibit at the International Museum of the Horse. They have a little exhibit on Ashland Stud and Josephine, and it hangs there on loan. We have 2 more in storage. We don't know what races they came from or what tracks, but they are prizes that John won racing horses. Now, I want to talk about a very important horse for us, a very important horse in Derby history. This horse right here, Allendale. Allendale was bred by Thomas Clay McDowell. Thomas Clay McDowell was a great-grandson of Henry Clay, grandson of Henry Clay McDowell and Ann Clay McDowell. He grew up here on the farm, came here on the farm when he was a young man, and they bought the farm. Eventually, his Aunt Mag, designed a house for him. Good morning, Gaynell. Nice to see you. That house stood where the Hanover Tower now stands at the corner of Hanover Road and Richmond Road. And he had an Ashland stud operation here in thoroughbreds. He was very, very successful as a thoroughbred owner and breeder. He owned Allendale. This is the only horse the family ever owned to win the Derby. We've bred at least 3 here at Ashland. This is the only one they ever owned. Allendale won the Derby in 1902. The man who was riding the horse, and you can see him here, you can also see him right here, is a man named Jimmy Winkfield. Good morning, Connie. Jimmy is a really interesting person. Jimmy was a black jockey in the early years, well, in Kentucky, from the beginning of the horse industry up until the 19-teens. Most of the people who did the work of the horse industry, worked in the stables, exercised the horses, etc., were black. And jockeys were black. Now, in Henry Clay's time, they would have been enslaved. We're doing some research now and developing information perhaps about some of the people enslaved here who may have done this work. But after slavery ended, they continued to be doing this work, and at that point they became paid. And in fact, most of the derbies won in the early years, most of the first 20 derbies or so were won by black jockeys. And a large percentage, 80 or 90% of the mounts were black jockeys. So they dominated the sport. And Jimmy certainly did that. Jimmy ran in 4 derbies, starting in 1900 and ending in 1903. In those 4 derbies, he placed 3rd, 1st, and 2nd. So that's an impressive record. He was 18 when he ran his first derby and 21 when he ran his last. And he would have probably competed in many more and actually probably notched a goodly number more wins. But unfortunately, like many others, he was run out of the business because of the color of his skin. He became crosswise with John Madden, the owner of Hamburg Farm, and John Madden had him run out of the horse business. Most of the black jockeys were gone by the 1910s because of their race. Because they were achieving financial success, fame, etc., that was providing them a sort of equality, and white horse owners wouldn't have that. So they were run out of the business, and they've not really ever truly returned. Jimmy ended up in Europe, went to Europe in 1904, spent pretty much the whole of the remainder of his life there, very successfully racing and riding and training in Russia, in Poland, and in France. He came back to the States a few times. He came back during World War II because of World War II. The last time that I know of that he returned was in 1961. He was asked to come back because they wanted to commemorate the fact that he had, it was 60 years since he had won his first Derby. So he was invited back to Louisville, and in fact invited to an event at the Brown Hotel the morning of the Derby. Well, he went to the Brown Hotel with his family and went to enter the front door, and the doorman refused to allow him to enter because he was black. He said, "You have to go around to the back." Well, Jimmy refused to do that and held his ground until eventually they let him in. But even then, even when he was invited back, he still wasn't allowed to participate equally. It's really rather sad. His man desperately wanted to come home to Kentucky, to die in Kentucky, to be buried in Kentucky, where he was born. He was born in Childsburg, which is out near Frederick Douglass High School. But sadly, he died in France, and he is buried today on the farm in which he lived in France. So he never made it back. He is the last African-American jockey to win the Derby. No African-American jockey has won it since he did it in 1902. And in fact, only a very small number have even competed in the Derby. This year, I am pleased to tell you that we have an African-American jockey in the Derby. His name is Kendrick Carmouche. This is Mr. Carmouche. He will be riding from the 20 slot. The horse he's riding is called Bourbonic. It's kind of a long shot. He will be riding from the far outside, but he carries the weight of history as he rides. Maybe he can become the first African American since Jimmy Winkfield to win the race. Now, another man who, because of the color of his skin, did not receive the credit that he deserved is this man. This is Courtney Matthews. Courtney Matthews was a trainer of great repute. He trained for Thomas Clay McDowell for 39 years, very, very successfully, including training Allendale. So he did that work. Now, Thomas Clay McDowell was officially listed in the record as having owned, bred, and trained Allendale, which is pretty amazing. Almost no one is on all three lines in the same race. But the reality is, this man did the work, and it was hard work. Allendale had some difficulties, some strength problems. So instead of being ridden by Jimmy in training, he was actually pulling a small cart or sulky in order to ensure that he was strong enough when the Derby came to compete. Allendale's a really interesting story. Allendale had these issues. Like I say, he raced in a number of races and did very well as a 2-year-old. Allendale only raced once as a 3-year-old. That race was the Kentucky Derby. No other Derby entrant has ever done that. Raced one time and only one time. And in fact, I don't think it would be possible now. You would have to have more races than that to qualify. Good morning, Bill. When he raced, he came out early, went to a lead, began to tire, and actually suffered some sort of injury late. And Jimmy, at the end of the race, was asked, "Why do you look so tired? You look exhausted." He said, "Well, I've been riding 4 horses." What he meant by that was, this race, the 1902 Derby, was the smallest Derby on record. There were only 4 horses. Thomas Clay McDowell actually owned 2 of them. He owned Allendale and a horse called the Rival. Now, he had a white jockey who regularly rode for him. And the deal was that that white jockey was going to get the better of the 2 mounts for the Derby. Well, Jimmy did all the training. So he figured out what he thought was the better horse and made sure when training the horses to ride them in such a way that it appeared the Rival was the better horse, even though he knew Allendale was. So he got Allendale. When the day of the race came, he races Allendale. There are these other 3 horses in the field, and Allendale was not the favorite, not even close. In fact, neither of Thomas Clay McDowell's horses were. One of the other 2 were. But as he's riding the race and he's sensing that Allendale is having a little difficulty, he starts strategically maneuvering against the other horses. At that time, Churchill Downs covered the track with sand in the winter to protect it. And in the spring, when it was time for racing, they just pushed it all off to the edge of the track. So it was kind of a heap around the edge of the track. Well, what he did was push the other horses further and further out until they bogged down in the sand, which enabled him to win the race. So it was a brilliant piece of strategy, one of the most strategic races ever run. So it's a neat story. We'll see what happens this year with Kendrick. We'll see if he's able to join this elite fraternity. Now, some of you may wish to have a mint julep. Some of you may be having a mint julep now. I don't know. We got some julep cups. Some of these are family cups. I believe this one right here with the handle is actually an Asa Blanchard, which is Kentucky's foremost silversmith. These are from the Clay family. I don't think any of these actually descend from Henry Clay. Here's one down here. This got his name on it. Actually, I think this one did belong to Henry Clay right here. So we have several in the collection. Henry Clay, of course, was a bourbon lover. Enjoyed bourbon regularly. In fact, got it from LeBrow and Graham, which is now Woodford Reserve, among others. It was also associated with Old Crow. Now, there's lots of legend about Henry Clay and the mint julep. It is said that he introduced the mint julep to Washington at the Round Robin Bar at the Willard Hotel. They actually have a recipe on the wall that they purport to be his, and will gladly make it for you if you go there. And if you're in Washington, I do recommend the Round Robin. It's a great place. The bartender is a really wonderful man who will tell you lots of great stories. Yeah, I can imagine not, Brad. Maybe you can shine them up for the Derby. I know you'll be having a mint julep, probably more than one. But anyway, so that's the story. Now, I have never found a mint julep recipe in Henry Clay's own hand or in a source that I feel I could say is verifiably accurate. So I don't know for sure that that's true. The mint julep was certainly around. There are sources for it as early as 1803 in Virginia. So clearly he would have known about it. So when you have one today, make a toast to Henry Clay. Now, as we close out our show today, as promised, I am going to reveal the names of the two horses in the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby who are descended from Henry Clay's mares. This year is the year of Margaret Wood. Both are descended from Margaret Wood, as is Star Davis. So they share that with him. Maracuja is the horse in the Oaks. That's Maracuja. She will be starting from the 2-hole. I think 20-1 odds. Starting way inside can be a good thing, not much distance to the rail. The challenge to it is that she's going to have 13 horses outside of her, all crushing to get in. So that can be tricky. See how she handles it. The other horse, the horse in the Derby, is Midnight Bourbon. That's Midnight Bourbon right there. Midnight Bourbon is also a 20-1 shot. He will be starting from the 10-hole, so right in the middle, which is generally considered a very desirable place to start. Certainly not going to be a favorite, but is a horse that you can't totally discount either. He's done some good things, has a great starting spot, so who knows? I should note that we are currently in a 38-year drought. The last horse of ours to win the Derby, 1983, Sonny's Halo, which followed 1982, Gato del Sol, the only back-to-back winners I think we've ever had. So we're definitely due. There's no question of that. I've been saying since I got here over 19 years ago, maybe this will be the year. Well, maybe this will. And we will end the longest drought we've ever had in the Derby. So that's all of our Derby story. I'll be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. We will be open for tours today, tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you want to do something while you wait for the Derby, come on out, take a tour. You can see more of these wonderful artifacts. We have some great Derby stuff in the museum store. I think we have mint julep syrup and julep cups and a number of other horse-related items. So stop on by. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you very much for tuning in. If you choose to bet, good luck. Please bet cautiously. We accept no responsibility for any betting action. Everyone have a good day and enjoy the Derby. Thank you very much.